Hello, everyone. My name is Abigail King, and I did my psychology senior seminar research project on creativity and mental illness and the real link between those two variables. So the purpose of this study is really to expand upon previous research and to analyze the directional relationship between the two variables. So the study exists to analyze the questions of, are creative individuals more likely to suffer from mental illness, or are people with mental illnesses more likely to be creative or participate in creative activities? And are there similar characteristics between creativity and mental health disorders such as general anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, and even bipolar disorder? And which of those characteristics could be a predictor or the correlation between creativity and mental health? So some previous research has been done on this topic. Research studies on the association between mental illness and creativity have documented various results. Many studies found mixed results, with some identifying clear positive evidence linking creativity and mental illness, while others found no evidence or unclear findings. Erica Lorinen and some colleagues studied the link between mental disorder and creative ability. Through the literature and empirical research, their data concluded that there was little to no consensus on the exact link between the two variables. So two main methods of studies have been used to form a connection between creativity and mental illness, one being studies of creative professionals and highly creative individuals to find whether or not they displayed higher prevalence or indications of mental illness than the general public, or two, studies of people who were seen as mentally ill or to suffer from severe mental illness and to find whether they were unusually creative. Creative activity has shown to be prevalent in individuals with mental illness, however, specifically with bipolar disorder, during episodes of mania or severe high, but creativity is actually shown significantly to decrease during episodes of severe illness or depression. Other research also supports this with promoting a negative relationship between creativity and mental illness, supporting the idea that creativity actually is hindered by the prevalence of mental illness developed from one's childhood, specifically from trauma. So research from a clinical study has shown that specifically bipolar disorder is shown with significant prevalence in creative individuals. And it also supports that creative individuals are more effective and efficient in their creative works and their processes when their symptoms are under control and well managed. So after extensive research, it is hypothesized that number one, creative people are not more likely to suffer from mental health disorders. Number two, individuals with general anxiety disorder are not more likely to be creative. And three, there is a negative correlation between individuals suffering from anxiety and being creative. Four, individuals who suffer from major depressive disorder are not more likely to be creative. And five, there is a negative correlation between depression and creativity. 6, individuals with bipolar disorder are more likely to be creative. And 7, there are similarities in a positive correlation between creative characteristics and the characteristics of bipolar disorder. So the measures that were used during this study, there's the ADHD self-report scale, and this is an 18-item scale that was used to measure participants' hyperactivity levels over the past 6 months. The mood disorder questionnaire was also used. This is a 16-item scale, and it was used to measure symptoms of specifically bipolar disorder. The depression and anxiety stress scale is a 21-item scale that does 3 sets of a self-report scale designed to measure the emotional states of depression, anxiety, and stress. And then creativity was measured using the Kaufman Domains of Creativity scale. It's a 50-item scale, and it has 5 different self-report scales designed to measure the 5 different types of creativity: everyday, scholarly, performance, science, and the arts of creativity. There was a total of 91 participants, all aged over 18, and they were all sampled using a convenience sample that was selected from Maryville SONA systems and social media, specifically Facebook. The demographics, about 80% of the participants were female, only 13% being male, and 5% being third-party non-binary. 84% of our participants were identified as white, 8% identified as Black or African American, 2% identified as Asian, 2% identified as Hispanic or Latino, and 1% identified as Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. The participants completed an online self-report survey about their creativity abilities and mood or actions during specific situations. The research findings of this study, 3 of the hypotheses were supported, while 4 of them were not. As you can see in Table 1, to test the hypothesis that individuals with general anxiety disorder are not more likely to be creative, a correlation was used, and it was also used to test whether or not there was a positive or negative correlation between anxiety. Specifically, this test measured the degree to which levels of facets of anxiety related to the levels and facets of creativity. So Pearson correlation actually indicated a non-significant small positive relationship between creativity and anxiety with a Pearson's R value of 0.127 and a P value of 0.230. To test the second hypothesis, that individuals who suffer from major depressive disorder are not more likely to be creative, and also the third as well, that there is a negative correlation between depression and creativity. A correlation was used for both of these. Specifically, this test measured the degree to which levels and facets of depression related to levels and facets of creativity. A Pearson correlation was also used, which indicated a non-significant small positive relationship between creativity and depression, which did not support my original hypothesis, with a Pearson's R value of 0.140 and a p-value of 0.186, as shown in Table 2. As you can see in Table 3, in order to test the hypothesis that creative people are not more likely to suffer from mental health disorder, a Pearson correlation was also used. This test measured the degree to which creative people also associate with mental health disorders, and as predicted, the original hypothesis was supported by the results. A Pearson correlation indicated a significant small negative relationship between creativity and mental illness. So the participants who actually scored higher on the creativity scale for everyday creativity, which is more related to genetics and what you were kind of born with, they scored significantly lower on the mental illness scales. And then, as you can see in Table 4, to test the hypotheses that individuals with bipolar disorder are more likely to be creative, and that there are similarities and a positive correlation between creative characteristics and the characteristics of bipolar disorder. Pearson correlation was also used. Specifically, this test measured the degree to which levels and facets of bipolar disorder and hyperactivity related to levels and facets of bipolar disorder and hyperactivity related to levels of creativity. As predicted, the original hypotheses were supported. A Pearson correlation indicated a significant small positive relationship between creativity and bipolar affective disorder, with a Pearson R value of 0.247 and a P value of 0.018. Also, a Pearson correlation indicated a non-significant small positive relationship between creativity and hyperactivity, with an Pearson's R value of 0.053 and a p-value of 0.620. So, through previous research, Cropley found that creativity may be prevalent in individuals with mental illness, particularly bipolar disorder, and during episodes of mania and severe high, but that creativity decreased, significantly during episodes of severe illness or depression. And this, however, is not supported by the current study, as shown that individuals with anxiety and depression still showed higher levels of creativity than the average. And results also supported a positive correlation between anxiety and creativity, as well as depression and creativity, as participants who tested higher for those mental illnesses also tested higher for creativity. And according to previous scales, this is a reasonable finding. As with Hare, he says that there is a definite link between creativity and insanity or mental illness, no matter what type it is. However, the results from this current study are actually in direct opposition of some previous research, specifically Jeffrey Garfield. He found that creativity helps the mind focus and releases dopamine, which is a natural antidepressant, and it actually reduces depression, stress, and anxiety. So he is saying that there is a negative relationship between the two. However, the current study actually supported a positive relationship between creativity and depression, as well as creativity and anxiety. So there's continued questions from this study, does mental illness result from high levels of creativity or genius, or does increased levels of creativity result from mental illness? In which direction does the link between those two variables exist? So there are some limitations to this study. Even previous studies have found contain some flaws and limitations in the quality of research and methodology, as some previous studies have found that they had sampling issues due to focusing specifically on creative individuals or specifically on those with mental illnesses, and that can also result from a variation in the lifetime prevalence of mental illness that has been reported for the samples. So some limitations of the current study are the fact that it is a self-report survey and it can rarely be independently verified. And also a convenient sampling. So that leads to sampling bias and a selection bias as to why someone would have taken this specific survey, because you never know the intention behind why, if they receive credit for it or anything like that. So that is definitely a limitation of the study. In order to build upon that and really limit those limitations would be to make an experiment and really test medically for creativity and mental illness and even a lifetime prevalency and severity of mental illness, to be able to compare that and see if that has any effect on any of the scores, as well as having a controlled sample. The sample of the current study doesn't really represent the general population extremely well, due to the fact that 80% were females, and there's no way to know if these results are specifically geared towards more of a female population, and if it could be different for a male population. And that would be something that can definitely be continued in future research.